And it is precisely here, in this overlooked intersection of belief and biology, that the ancient teachings begin to reveal something extraordinary about our capacity to regenerate. For thousands of years, civilizations understood the human body not as a mechanical object, but as a living field of intelligence, constantly responding to the signals it receives from consciousness. When I study these traditions alongside modern research, I see a pattern that is impossible to ignore. Regeneration was never thought of as accidental, but as responsive. In the ancient worldview, healing was not something done to the body, it was something awakened within it. The body was seen as a listener. Every thought, every emotional state, every deeply held belief spoke directly to the cells. Today, biology is finally catching up to this idea. We now know that cells have receptors not only for chemical signals, but for information carried through emotion and perception. The language has changed, but the principle remains the same. What fascinates me most is that ancient cultures trained people to enter emotional states that modern science now recognizes as biologically coherent. Calm focus, heart-centered appreciation, a felt sense of safety and meaning. These were not spiritual luxuries, they were survival technologies. In those states, the nervous system shifts, inflammation decreases, and repair mechanisms become more efficient. The body stops preparing for danger and starts investing energy in renewal. Regeneration, then, is not about forcing the body to heal. It is about removing the internal signals that prevent healing from occurring. Chronic stress, unresolved fear, and persistent self-judgment keep the body locked in protection mode. Ancient teachings address this directly. Long before we had words like cortisol or immune suppression, they taught practices that softened the mind so the body could remember how to restore itself. I want to be very clear here. This is not mystical thinking divorced from reality. It is practical and grounded. When belief changes, chemistry changes. When emotional patterns shift, gene expression follows. This is not theory. It is observable biology. The ancients described it symbolically, but the effect is the same. The body is constantly reading the environment inside us. One of the most powerful ideas preserved in ancient texts is that the heart acts as a mediator between thought and biology, not metaphorically, but functionally. The heart generates measurable electromagnetic signals that influence the brain and the body. When emotion and thought are aligned, the system becomes ordered. Order is the foundation of regeneration. Chaos is the enemy of repair. In this light, ancient rituals were not superstition. They were structured ways of creating internal coherence. Chanting, breath control, visualization, and focused intention all serve to synchronize mind and body. Today, we see similar effects in studies on meditation and breathwork. Blood chemistry changes, immune markers improve, recovery accelerates. What was once sacred practice is now measurable data. But here is where the conversation becomes deeply personal. Ancient wisdom never separated knowledge from responsibility. If belief shapes biology, then we are not passive victims of our condition. We are participants. That realization can be empowering, but it can also be uncomfortable. It asks us to look honestly at the emotional environments we live in every day. Many people are unknowingly rehearsing beliefs that signal the body to age, weaken, and break down. Beliefs like my body is failing, or this is just how it runs in my family, or healing takes a long time. These thoughts may feel harmless, but to the body they are instructions. Ancient teachings warned about this, emphasizing that words spoken internally carry the same power as actions taken externally. Regeneration begins when the inner dialogue changes from expectation of decline to expectation of restoration, not through denial, but through informed awareness. The body responds to what it believes is possible. When possibility expands, so does physiological response. This is why placebo effects can be so powerful. They are not tricks. They are demonstrations of belief activating biology. Ancient cultures intentionally trained imagination, not as fantasy, but as a biological tool. Visualization was used to give the body a template of wholeness. Modern neuroscience confirms that imagined experiences activate many of the same neural circuits as real ones. The body does not sharply distinguish between what is vividly imagined and what is physically occurring. This insight alone reshapes how we understand healing. Emotion plays a crucial role here. Regeneration thrives in emotional states that signal safety and connection, Gratitude, compassion, and awe are not just pleasant feelings, they are biochemical messages. They tell the body that the environment is supportive. In response, repair processes accelerate. Ancient wisdom placed enormous emphasis on cultivating these states intentionally. This brings us to a truth that is both ancient and urgently modern. The body is not broken. It is adaptive. When regeneration does not occur, it is often because the body is responding appropriately to internal signals of threat or hopelessness. Change the signal and the response changes. This is not instant or magical, but it is reliable. I have seen again and again that when people shift their perception of their body from enemy to ally, something profound happens. Tension softens, breath deepens, the nervous system recalibrates. These subtle shifts accumulate, creating conditions where regeneration becomes more likely. The ancients understood that healing was a relationship, not a repair job, and yet ancient knowledge also cautions us not to rush this process. Regeneration follows rhythm. Just as nature restores itself in cycles, the body heals in waves. Patience is not passive, it is cooperative. When we try to force outcomes, we often reintroduce stress signals that undermine the very healing we seek. Perhaps the most radical teaching preserved across ancient traditions is this: we are not separate from the intelligence that built our bodies. That intelligence is still present, still responsive, and still listening. When we align belief, emotion, and intention, we are not creating something new, we are remembering something ancient. This understanding reframes regeneration not as a future possibility, but as a present conversation. Every moment, the body is asking a question: is it safe to repair now? The answer comes not from doctors or devices alone, but from the quality of awareness we bring to our own experience. When awareness becomes coherent, compassionate, and clear, the body receives permission to shift. And so as we explore these ancient teachings through the lens of modern science, we begin to see that regeneration is less about discovering new technologies and more about recovering forgotten skills. Skills of attention, skills of emotional regulation, skills of belief refinement. When these are practiced consistently, the body responds in ways that can appear extraordinary, yet are deeply natural. The question that remains, and the one ancient wisdom invites us to sit with, is not whether the human body can regenerate, but whether we are willing to create the internal conditions that allow it to do what it has always known how to do, even when that requires us to let go of familiar stories, inherited limitations, and the comfort of believing that healing must always come from somewhere outside ourselves. Because in the quiet moments when belief softens and attention turns inward, something begins to reorganize, and the body starts to move toward balance in ways that are subtle at first, almost unnoticeable, until one day we realize that the conversation has changed. And with it, the direction of our biology begins to shift in ways that challenge everything we thought we knew about limitation and possibility. When that shift occurs, ancient knowledge suggests that regeneration is no longer an exception, but a natural outcome of alignment. I have found that this alignment begins not with effort, but with awareness. Awareness of how often we unconsciously signal urgency, self-criticism, or fear to our own biology. Ancient teachings emphasize daily practices not because they were ritualistic, but because consistency trains the nervous system. Small moments of coherence, repeated over time, build resilience. Modern science now shows that repeated emotional states literally rewire neural pathways. What we practice internally becomes our default externally. Regeneration favors defaults of balance, not spikes of intention followed by long periods of stress. One overlooked aspect of ancient regeneration knowledge is the role of identity. People were taught to see themselves as whole even while experiencing illness. Identity preceded outcome. Today, many people unknowingly fuse their identity with diagnosis, age, or genetic history. The body listens closely to identity statements. When I say, "this is who I am," the body interprets it as instruction. Ancient cultures guarded language carefully for this reason. Words were not just descriptive, they were formative. Speaking of the body with respect, curiosity and trust was considered essential to healing. This does not mean denying pain or difficulty. It means refusing to define the self by dysfunction. Modern psychoneuroimmunology echoes this principle in scientific terms. Another critical insight from ancient traditions is the understanding of rest as an active biological state. Regeneration does not occur when the body is constantly stimulated. Deep rest, both mental and physical, signals safety. In that safety, repair mechanisms activate. Today, chronic overstimulation has become normalized. Ancient wisdom would see this as a direct obstacle to healing. Sleep, silence, and stillness were treated as sacred technologies. During these states, the mind loosens its grip on control, allowing deeper regulatory systems to operate. Modern research confirms that cellular repair, memory consolidation, and immune regulation are most active during rest. The ancients knew this intuitively and structured life around it. Breath also played a central role. Controlled breathing was used to regulate emotion and physiology simultaneously. Slow, rhythmic breathing communicates stability to the brainstem. This stabilizes heart rate, blood pressure, and inflammatory response. Regeneration thrives in this internal environment. Breath was considered the bridge between conscious intention and unconscious biology. What strikes me is how little of this knowledge has truly disappeared. It has simply been reframed. Where ancient texts spoke of life force, modern science speaks of bioelectricity. Where ancient healers spoke of harmony, researchers speak of homeostasis. The language has changed, but the body has not. Regeneration is not an isolated event. It is a systemic response. Cells do not heal independently. They respond collectively to the signals they share. Ancient wisdom emphasized community and connection for this reason. Isolation was understood to weaken the life force. Today, loneliness is recognized as a significant risk factor for disease. Connection, once again, proves regenerative. Emotionally supportive environments reduce stress hormones and improve immune function. This is measurable. Ancient societies cultivated shared rituals, not only for meaning, but for biological regulation. Humans heal better together. The nervous system calibrates itself through relationship. Regeneration is social as much as it is individual. There is also an important warning embedded in ancient teachings. Regeneration cannot be commanded through willpower alone. Control-based approaches often reinforce the very stress that blocks healing. Instead, ancient practices encourage surrender, trust, and receptivity. These states are not passive, they are neurologically distinct. They activate parasympathetic responses, essential for repair. This challenges modern assumptions about effort. Doing less, when done consciously, can create more biological change than constant striving. The body repairs itself when it feels supported, not pressured. Ancient wisdom framed this as aligning with natural law rather than imposing personal desire. One of the most misunderstood ideas about regeneration is time. Ancient cultures did not measure healing strictly in days or weeks. They observed readiness. Healing occurred when conditions were right. Modern impatience often introduces frustration, which reactivates stress pathways. Patience, in this context, is not waiting, it is maintaining coherence while change unfolds. Belief remains the central axis. Not blind belief, but informed belief grounded in understanding. When belief is rigid, it limits response. When belief is flexible, it invites adaptation. The body is adapted by nature. It evolved to respond to changing environments. Ancient wisdom encouraged adaptability of mind to support adaptability of body. This adaptability is especially important in aging. Ancient texts did not assume inevitable decline. Aging was seen as a transition, not a degeneration. Elders were often described as reservoirs of vitality, not examples of breakdown. Modern research into epigenetics suggests that lifestyle and mindset significantly influence how genes associated with aging are expressed. Regeneration, then, is not confined to injury or illness. It applies to vitality itself. Energy levels, cognitive clarity, and emotional stability are all subject to regenerative processes. When we stop signaling depletion, the body reallocates resources toward renewal. Ancient practices aim to preserve life force, not just restore it after loss. I often reflect on how modern medicine excels at intervention but struggles with prevention. Ancient knowledge prioritized prevention through alignment. When mind, emotion, and behavior were coherent, illness was less likely to arise. This does not eliminate the need for medical care, but it reframes health as an ongoing practice rather than a crisis response. The challenge today is not access to information, but integration. We know intellectually that stress harms the body, yet we continue to live as if urgency is normal. Ancient wisdom would see this as a mismatch between environment and biology. Regeneration requires congruence between how we live and how the body is designed to function. Congruence begins with attention. What we repeatedly attend to becomes biologically relevant. Fear-focused attention amplifies threat responses. Appreciation-focused attention amplifies repair responses. This is not positive thinking, it is signal selection. Ancient teachings trained attention deliberately, recognizing its power to shape experience at the cellular level. As we begin to apply these principles, subtle changes often appear first. Improved sleep, slightly increased energy, a sense of emotional steadiness. These are early indicators of systemic shift. Ancient wisdom taught people to notice these signs, not dismiss them. Small improvements signal that internal conditions are changing. What follows is not linear. There may be periods of integration where nothing seems to happen. Ancient teachings emphasize trust during these phases. The body reorganizes below the threshold of awareness before change becomes visible. Modern science supports this through models of nonlinear biological adaptation. Ultimately, regeneration emerges when resistance softens. Resistance to rest, to patience, to emotional honesty. Ancient practices gently dismantled resistance by creating safe internal spaces. Today, we must consciously recreate those spaces in a world that rarely encourages them. As I continue to explore these teachings, I am reminded that regeneration is not something we chase. It is something we allow. The body already knows the way. Our role is to stop interrupting the process with fear-based signals and begin offering consistent messages of safety, coherence, and trust. Because in that quiet exchange between awareness and biology, something ancient stirs, something intelligent responds, and the body begins to reveal capacities that were never lost. Only waiting for the moment when belief, emotion, and attention finally align enough for the conversation to deepen and for regeneration to move from possibility into lived experience, even as we are still learning how to listen closely enough to recognize the subtle language through which the body continues to speak, speaking through sensations, rhythms, and intuitive signals that modern life has trained us to ignore. Ancient knowledge placed enormous value on listening. Listening to fatigue before collapse. Listening to emotion before it hardened into illness. Listening to the quiet intelligence that communicates long before symptoms appear. Regeneration begins when listening becomes more important than controlling. In ancient systems, symptoms were not enemies, they were messages, signals that something in the internal environment was out of balance. Instead of suppressing these signals immediately, attention was directed toward understanding their origin. Today, this perspective feels radical, yet neuroscience confirms that awareness itself can modulate pain perception and inflammatory response. Observation changes physiology. This brings us to an uncomfortable but essential idea. Many regenerative blocks are not physical at all. They are emotional patterns stored in the body. Unprocessed grief, unresolved anger, chronic guilt. Ancient cultures had communal ways to release these burdens through ceremony, storytelling, and movement. Without release, emotion becomes tension. Tension becomes chemistry. Chemistry becomes condition. Modern research into trauma shows how deeply this ancient insight holds true. The body remembers what the mind tries to forget. Regeneration requires creating enough internal safety for those memories to be integrated rather than suppressed. This is not about reliving the past, but about completing unfinished biological responses so the system can move forward. Movement itself was seen as medicine, not exercise for appearance, but movement for circulation of energy and information. Slow, intentional movement, synchronized breath, emotion, and attention. This coordination optimized neural signaling and lymphatic flow. Regeneration thrives where circulation is free, whether physical, emotional, or mental. Ancient teachings also emphasized alignment with natural cycles. Waking, eating, resting, and reflecting in rhythm with light and darkness. Modern circadian biology confirms that regeneration is deeply time-dependent. Hormones, immune function, and cellular repair follow precise rhythms. Disrupt those rhythms and healing slows. This is why ancient knowledge stressed simplicity. Fewer distractions, clearer signals. The body does not require complexity to heal, it requires clarity. Modern overstimulation confuses biological priorities. Ancient practices reduced noise so the body could distinguish between threat and opportunity. In that clarity, regeneration became more efficient. Another often misunderstood principle is faith. Not faith as belief without evidence, but faith as trust in process. Ancient cultures cultivated trust in the body's intelligence. Doubt was seen as destabilizing because it fragmented attention. Fragmented attention creates fragmented signaling. Coherent attention creates coherent response. When trust is present, the nervous system relaxes. This relaxation is not psychological alone, it is chemical. Neurotransmitters shift. Immune cells change behavior. Regeneration accelerates. Trust, then, is not abstract. It is biological permission. Ancient healers understood that teaching someone to heal was more powerful than healing them directly. Empowerment itself is regenerative. Feeling capable shifts hormonal balance. Learned helplessness suppresses immune response. Learned agency enhances it. Modern studies echo this ancient observation with striking precision. The ancients also warned against impatience disguised as motivation. Constantly scanning the body for results reinforces vigilance. Vigilance signals danger. Danger suppresses regeneration. Healing unfolds best when attention is balanced, present, but not obsessive. This paradox is difficult for modern minds, yet essential. Diet, too, was approached differently. Food was not merely fuel, it was information. Consumed with gratitude and awareness, it supported coherence. Consumed with anxiety or distraction, it introduced stress. Modern research shows that digestion itself is influenced by emotional state. Ancient wisdom anticipated this without microscopes or assays. There is a subtle but powerful shift that occurs when people stop asking, why is my body doing this to me, and start asking, what is my body responding to? That question restores partnership. Partnership changes behavior. Behavior changes outcome. Regeneration follows relationship. Ancient teachings repeatedly return to the idea of wholeness. Fragmentation was considered the root of illness. Fragmentation between thought and feeling, between individual and community, between human and nature. Regeneration was the restoration of wholeness across these levels. Modern systems biology now views health as emergent from integrated networks rather than isolated parts. One of the most hopeful insights from both ancient wisdom and modern science is that small changes can have disproportionate effects. Tiny shifts in perception, practiced consistently, can cascade into significant biological transformation. This is why ancient practices were often simple, almost deceptively so. The challenge today is not learning new techniques, but unlearning habits of internal aggression. Self-criticism masquerading as discipline. Constant comparison framed as motivation. These patterns silently erode regenerative capacity. Ancient teachings approach the self with reverence, not judgment. Reverence alters posture, breath, tone of thought. The body responds immediately. Muscles soften. Heart rhythm stabilizes. Blood flow improves. These are not poetic descriptions. They are measurable events. Reverence is physiological. As people begin to apply these ideas, resistance often arises. Skepticism, doubt, frustration. Ancient systems anticipated this and framed it as part of the process. Resistance is the nervous system protecting familiar patterns. With gentle persistence, those patterns can update. Regeneration is adaptation, not force. I have noticed that the most profound shifts occur when people stop trying to heal and start cultivating conditions for health. Healing then becomes a side effect. This inversion mirrors ancient wisdom perfectly. Align with life, and life responds. There is also humility in this approach. Ancient knowledge never claimed that humans control regeneration, absolutely. Instead, it emphasized cooperation with larger intelligence. Humility reduces pressure. Reduced pressure supports healing. Even modern clinicians now recognize the role of expectation management in recovery. As we continue this exploration, it becomes clear that regeneration is not reserved for special individuals or rare circumstances. It is woven into our biology. What varies is access, awareness, and permission. Ancient teachings were designed to restore that access. When permission is given, the body does not ask for proof, it responds. Slowly at first, then with increasing confidence, systems recalibrate, feedback loops stabilize, regeneration unfolds quietly, often without dramatic markers, until the cumulative effect becomes undeniable. And yet this process is never static. It requires ongoing attention, ongoing relationship. Ancient wisdom did not promise permanent states, only sustainable practices. Regeneration must be renewed, just as coherence must be maintained. Perhaps this is the most important lesson. Regeneration is not a destination, it is a dialogue, a living exchange between awareness and biology. Each day the body asks new questions based on new conditions. Each day our responses shape the direction of adaptation. As we learn to listen more carefully, to respond more compassionately, and to trust more deeply in the intelligence that sustains us, we begin to sense that ancient knowledge was never about unlocking hidden powers, but about removing the layers of interference that obscure what is already present. And as those layers thin, the conversation between mind and body grows clearer, more intimate, and more responsive, inviting us to step into a way of living where regeneration is not something we chase in moments of crisis, but something we quietly cultivate through every choice, every perception, every breath, even as the next question emerges about how far this dialogue can deepen when we finally stop interrupting it and allow the body's ancient wisdom to guide the rhythm of what comes next. Because what we are uncovering now is not a technique that exists outside ourselves, but a principle that has always operated quietly within our biology, the innate capacity for restoration. In ancient times, this knowledge was considered sacred precisely because it revealed that our bodies are not passive machines, but responsive fields of intelligence. Every cell, every tissue, every organ is continuously reading the internal environment for signals of safety, coherence, and trust. When these signals are present, repair accelerates naturally. When they are absent, even the most advanced interventions cannot fully optimize recovery. I often remind myself and those I teach that the key is subtlety. Regeneration does not announce itself with fireworks. It whispers. It begins with small, almost imperceptible shifts, tension easing from shoulders, heart rate stabilizing, breath deepening, mood softening. These are the first signs that the internal environment is becoming hospitable for repair. Ancient cultures spent lifetimes honing the ability to notice these signals, to act on them before imbalance became disease. They called this attunement awareness, and it was considered as vital as food, water, or shelter. Belief, in this context, is far more than optimism. It is a set of internal instructions that the body interprets at the molecular level. Modern epigenetics now confirms that gene expression is highly responsive to signals generated by thought and emotion. Ancient traditions described this concept symbolically, teaching that thoughts and feelings feed the body. Today, we understand that this feeding is literal. When we cultivate coherent beliefs and emotions, we literally switch on genes associated with repair and resilience. The heart, often referred to metaphorically as the seat of emotion, functions as a biological transmitter in this process. Its rhythmic contractions generate electromagnetic fields that influence not only the brain, but also other cells in the body. Heart-centered emotional states like gratitude, love, and appreciation create harmonic patterns that stabilize nervous system function and optimize immune response. In ancient practice, this was cultivated deliberately through meditation, chanting, and ritual. Today, research demonstrates measurable physiological benefits that mirror these descriptions. Breath, movement, and posture act as the conduits for this internal communication. Ancient teachings never separated these from the mind. They understood that the body, mind, and consciousness form a unified system. Slow, intentional breathing communicates safety to the brainstem, reduces stress hormones, and promotes vascular and lymphatic circulation. Conscious movement aligns muscular and skeletal systems, optimizing internal energy flow. Posture communicates confidence and openness to the nervous system, setting the stage for cellular regeneration. But perhaps the most profound insight of all is the role of emotion. Ancient wisdom consistently emphasizes that unprocessed emotion blocks regeneration. Grief, fear, anger, and resentment are not just psychological. They become stored as tension in tissues, as altered chemical signaling, and as chronic inflammatory patterns. Regenerative practices, therefore, were never purely physical. They were designed to release emotional blockages, allowing the body to return to its natural state of coherence. Modern trauma science validates this, showing that unresolved emotion directly inhibits cellular repair mechanisms. Community and environment were also considered essential. Healing was never treated as purely individual. Isolation and social stress were recognized as destabilizing forces. Group rituals, shared storytelling, and communal care provided consistent positive signals to the nervous system, amplifying regenerative processes. Today's studies confirm that loneliness and social stress suppress immune function, whereas meaningful connection improves it. Ancient practices anticipated this centuries before laboratory validation. Equally important is the understanding of time and rhythm. Ancient knowledge framed healing in cycles aligned with daily, lunar, and seasonal rhythms. Regeneration was understood to be process-driven, not instant. Modern chronobiology confirms that hormonal release, cellular repair, and metabolic function follow precise biological rhythms. Ignoring these rhythms disrupts repair. Following them supports natural restoration. Ancient wisdom offers methods to harmonize with these rhythms through sleep, fasting, reflection, and movement, so the body can repair most effectively. Identity and self-perception are subtle but powerful regulators of regenerative potential. Ancient cultures taught that one's identity could not be bound to limitation, disease, or age. Self-concept, belief, and perception generate internal signals that the body interprets as instructions. When we identify with illness or weakness, we perpetuate biochemical conditions that hinder repair. When we identify with vitality, coherence, and wholeness, we create the internal environment for regeneration to thrive. Patience is another essential principle. Ancient wisdom cautioned against forcing outcomes. Healing unfolds in waves, often below the threshold of conscious awareness. Impatience generates stress, which undermines regenerative efforts. The body's intelligence operates according to its own timing, not ours. Learning to trust this timing is an essential part of the regenerative process. This is where faith, not as blind belief, but as trust in the body's intelligence, becomes indispensable. The process of regeneration is also intimately tied to learning and adaptability. Ancient knowledge framed humans as dynamic systems capable of responding to changing conditions. Habitual thought patterns, emotional conditioning, and environmental stressors create rigidity. Regeneration is optimized when we cultivate flexibility in thought, perception, and response. In other words, adaptability is a prerequisite for restoration. This aligns closely with modern research into neuroplasticity, showing that new patterns of thought and emotion can literally remodel neural pathways, creating lasting physiological effects. A core practice in ancient systems involved focused visualization and intention. Visualization was never merely imaginative play. It was a biologically precise tool. The body cannot distinguish between vividly imagined experiences and real ones. Repeated focused visualization of coherent, healthy states sends consistent signals to the nervous system, promoting cellular repair and systemic balance. Modern studies on mental rehearsal confirm that imagined practice produces measurable changes in motor control, neural activity, and even muscle tissue integrity. Another overlooked principle is the cultivation of emotional coherence through heart-mind alignment. Ancient wisdom emphasized that when emotion and intention are synchronized, the body achieves internal order. This order promotes optimal enzymatic function, reduces oxidative stress, and accelerates tissue repair. The practice of aligning heart and mind is simple in technique but profound in effect. It involves anchoring attention in the heart, cultivating positive emotional states, and allowing intention to flow without judgment or interference. Food and nourishment were also approached as more than sustenance. Ancient traditions recognize that how we consume food mindfully or distractedly with gratitude or anxiety affects internal chemistry. Modern science confirms that digestion is influenced by emotional and cognitive states. In essence, eating consciously creates a microenvironment within the body that supports regeneration, whereas eating under stress generates chemical signals that slow repair. One of the most radical ideas is that regeneration is not a matter of producing new capacities, but remembering what is already present. Ancient teachings framed the body as inherently intelligent, capable of repair from birth. Illness, aging, and degeneration were seen as interruptions to this intelligence rather than absolute failures. Modern epigenetic and regenerative studies echo this. The capacity for repair exists in virtually every cell, waiting for the right signals to activate. This leads to a subtle but critical insight. The greatest obstacle to regeneration is not physical deficiency, but interference. Interference created by chronic stress, unprocessed emotion, misaligned attention, and limiting belief. Ancient knowledge offers precise practices for removing these layers of interference: meditation, breathwork, ritualized movement, reflection, and communal support. Modern neuroscience and physiology now provide measurable confirmation that these practices reduce stress signaling, restore hormonal balance, and activate repair pathways. Regeneration, therefore, is fundamentally relational, not only in relation to others, but in relation to the self. Every moment, the body asks, am I safe? Am I coherent? Can I invest energy in repair? When our responses through thought, emotion, and attention affirm safety and coherence, repair processes engage. When responses signal threat, repair is suppressed. Ancient wisdom framed this as living in harmony with natural law. Modern science reframes it as signal optimization. The culmination of these insights is not a single technique, but a lifestyle of alignment. Ancient cultures cultivated patterns of daily attention, emotional awareness, rhythmic living, social integration, conscious nourishment, and mindful movement. These patterns collectively created a fertile internal environment for regeneration. Modern research confirms that multidimensional approaches are far more effective than isolated interventions. The body heals optimally when all systems, nervous, endocrine, immune, and circulatory, receive coherent, reinforcing signals simultaneously. And so as I reflect on this, I realize that regeneration is less a secret to be discovered than a capacity to be remembered. Our biology contains the knowledge. What is required is consistent, coherent attention, emotional clarity, and deliberate alignment with natural rhythms. Ancient wisdom was not mystical. It was observational, experiential, and practical. It provides a roadmap for awakening the body's innate ability to repair, restore, and regenerate. Even now, as we examine these principles through modern science, the conversation between mind and body deepens. Each moment of coherent attention, each breath grounded in presence, each emotion held with honesty contributes to a shift that is both subtle and profound. Regeneration is a living dialogue, an exchange of information between consciousness and biology that has been ongoing since the dawn of humanity. And as we continue to explore these practices and observations, the next question arises naturally. If regeneration is already built into the human system, what prevents it from being fully expressed, and how can we systematically remove the layers of interference, cultural conditioning, emotional suppression, misaligned belief, and chronic stress that mask this innate intelligence so that the body can return not only to baseline health, but to a state of vibrant, self-sustaining restoration, even as the possibilities of what the body can do begin to stretch beyond what we have previously imagined, revealing that our potential for renewal may be far greater than we have ever allowed ourselves to believe. Because the deeper we look, the more it becomes clear that regeneration is not merely a biological process, it is a dynamic conversation between consciousness, emotion, and the physical body, mediated by belief, attention, and intention. Ancient knowledge framed this interaction as natural, accessible, and integral to human life. Modern science now confirms that each thought, each emotional pattern, and each internalized belief has measurable effects on cellular function, gene expression, and systemic coherence. The body is constantly listening, and when we learn to speak its language clearly, restoration unfolds organically. I often reflect on how much of our regenerative potential remains dormant simply because we have never learned to honor this dialogue. Our culture emphasizes speed, productivity, and external solutions, yet the most profound signals for repair are internal. Chronic distraction, mental overdrive, and constant external stimulation mask the subtle communication pathways that the body uses to direct repair. Ancient wisdom sought to cultivate environments of quiet attentiveness precisely to allow these pathways to function without interference. This is why practices that seem simple, intentional breathing, reflective stillness, mindful movement, heart-centered emotion, are actually profoundly sophisticated. They create the conditions for cellular communication to operate in coherence. When the nervous system is calm, the immune system functions optimally, and the body reallocates energy toward repair rather than survival. Even minor improvements in internal coherence can create cascading effects across the entire physiology. Ancient texts frequently describe regeneration not as a linear process, but as cyclical and emergent. Healing unfolds in waves, and the body often moves through periods of subtle recalibration before observable improvements appear. Modern physiology validates this concept. Tissue repair, neural adaptation, and immune modulation all follow nonlinear timelines, Patience, awareness, and trust are therefore essential components of any regenerative practice. The ancients understood that forcing outcomes disrupts these cycles and slows restoration. Belief is central to this process. Not blind faith, but informed expectation. When we carry the expectation that the body is capable of repair, we literally alter internal signaling pathways. Placebo studies demonstrate this in stark detail. Belief triggers biochemical cascades that facilitate healing. Ancient wisdom recognized this principle long before laboratory evidence existed, teaching that the body's response is guided as much by perception as by physical intervention. Emotion is equally crucial. Chronic negative emotional patterns, fear, resentment, grief, generate stress chemistry that inhibits repair. Conversely, coherent emotional states, gratitude, compassion, appreciation, produce signals that enhance cellular regeneration. The body is exquisitely sensitive to these emotional cues, responding in ways that can be quantified through hormone levels, immune activity, and neural coherence. Ancient practices cultivated these states deliberately, often through ritual, reflection, and movement. The heart plays a unique mediating role in this interplay. Its rhythmic electromagnetic field communicates with the brain, the nervous system, and even peripheral tissues. Heart-centered emotional states create a harmonizing effect, reducing stress, enhancing communication between organs, and facilitating repair. This is not metaphorical. Modern cardiology and psychophysiology confirm measurable effects of emotional coherence on systemic function. Ancient knowledge recognized this centuries ago, framing the heart as both sensor and signal in the regenerative process. Breath functions as a direct bridge between conscious awareness and involuntary systems. Slow, rhythmic, and intentional breathing signals safety to the brainstem, reduces cortisol levels, and stabilizes cardiovascular function. Ancient techniques from meditative breathing to controlled exhalation practices were designed to optimize this signaling. Science now confirms that these practices enhance parasympathetic tone, a key requirement for efficient tissue repair and metabolic regulation. Movement, too, was never considered merely physical. Ancient practices emphasized flow, alignment, and rhythm to optimize circulation of energy and information. Modern studies support this view. Movement enhances lymphatic flow, oxygen delivery, and neural connectivity. When combined with breath and attention, movement becomes a medium through which mind and body communicate coherently, creating an internal environment favorable for regeneration. Ancient teachings also recognize the importance of context, the environment. Social connection and lifestyle rhythms all influence the body's capacity to repair. Isolation, overstimulation, and chronic stress inhibit regenerative potential. Community rituals, shared practices, and alignment with natural cycles were designed to amplify coherent signals, facilitating collective and individual repair. Modern psychology and immunology confirm that social support and environmental predictability significantly enhance recovery and resilience. Perhaps one of the most profound insights is the recognition that regeneration is a state of restored wholeness. Ancient systems framed disease or dysfunction not as inherent failure, but as fragmentation. Fragmentation of attention, emotion, behavior, or relationship. Healing is therefore understood as reintegration, the restoration of coherence across mind, body, and environment. Modern systems biology echoes this principle. Health emerges from integrated networks rather than isolated systems. Identity and self-perception are equally critical. Ancient wisdom taught that one's sense of self profoundly influences biological outcomes. When identity is tied to limitation, weakness, or illness, internal signals reinforce suppression of repair. When identity aligns with wholeness, vitality, and resilience, internal signaling favors regeneration. Modern psychoneuroimmunology confirms that self-concept directly modulates stress response and immune function, reinforcing this ancient principle. Another often overlooked aspect is the subtlety of incremental change. Regeneration rarely manifests as dramatic, immediate transformation. It begins with micro-adjustments, slightly deeper breaths, minor shifts in posture, a moment of emotional clarity, or a conscious redirection of thought. Over time, these small adjustments accumulate, producing systemic effects that are both profound and sustainable. Ancient practice emphasized attention to these subtle signals, cultivating awareness as a prerequisite for enduring regeneration. Time is another variable in this process. Ancient knowledge framed healing in cycles aligned with circadian, lunar, and seasonal rhythms. Regenerative processes are time-dependent. Hormones, enzyme activity, cellular repair, and immune function all follow predictable rhythms. Disrupting these rhythms through irregular sleep, misaligned activity, or constant stimulation reduces the body's capacity to repair. Conversely, aligning with these natural patterns optimizes repair efficiency. Diet and nourishment were similarly understood as signaling systems rather than mere fuel sources. Ancient practice emphasized mindful consumption, recognizing that how we eat, our attention, emotional state, and gratitude affects digestion, metabolic signaling, and systemic repair. Modern research corroborates this. Mindful eating reduces stress responses and enhances nutrient absorption, providing biochemical conditions favorable for regeneration. Perhaps the most remarkable insight bridging ancient and modern perspectives is that regeneration is inherent. It is not a gift to be earned or a rarity to be discovered. It is built into our biology, constantly seeking expression. What interferes with it is not the absence of capacity, but layers of stress, misaligned attention, and unresolved emotion. Ancient wisdom offered methods to systematically remove these layers: breath, movement, emotion regulation, intentional focus, social coherence, and alignment with natural cycles. Modern science is beginning to validate these practices as measurable interventions that optimize repair and resilience. Regeneration is also relational. It depends on our interaction with ourselves, with others, and with the environment. Ancient cultures understood that social connection, communal ritual, and environmental harmony amplify internal coherence, whereas isolation and discord suppress it. Modern research shows that social engagement, empathy, and supportive networks directly influence neurochemical and immune responses, facilitating repair. Ultimately, regeneration is not something we achieve, it is something we allow. It unfolds when we create conditions for coherence, emotional clarity, attentional focus, physiological alignment, and trust in the body's intelligence. Ancient knowledge framed this not as an occasional practice, but as a way of life, a rhythm of living that constantly nurtures internal harmony. Today, we see this principle confirmed by research into psychoneuroimmunology, epigenetics, and circadian biology. And as I reflect on all of this, the next question emerges naturally. If regeneration is built into our biology, waiting for coherent signals to activate it, then what practices, attention patterns, and environmental conditions can we systematically cultivate to remove interference, enhance coherence, and allow the body's innate intelligence to restore itself fully, not just to baseline health, but to a state of vibrant, self-sustaining vitality where each thought, emotion, and breath contributes to an ongoing living conversation between consciousness and biology, and where the possibilities of human regeneration extend beyond what we have previously imagined, hinting at capacities that have always existed, quietly waiting for us to listen, respond, and engage in the dialogue that awakens the full expression of what it means to be alive.